Welcome to the Pay Love Forward podcast. My name is Dr. Matthew Leavenworth, founder and director of Pay Love Forward. At Pay Love Forward, our mission is to build compassionate communities for the at-risk and underserved through mentorship. This podcast is one way we live out that mission. This is part 3 of our series on Story as Nonviolent Resistance. It was recorded in an open Zoom meeting and live streamed on Facebook. I was joined with Brian Miller, a Helena attorney and congressional candidate here in Montana. Brian has spent the last 15 years practicing law across the state, working in both state and federal courts. He's now running for Congress in Montana's Eastern District against Trump loyalist Troy Downing. Brian and I intend to continue this series, developing a consistent live platform where we connect with Montanans about issues right here in our state, including Brian's bid for Congress. In this series, I've been arguing that an election is ultimately a war of stories. I believe we can learn to fight with stories, and if we're going to meet the demands of the times, we must understand the narrative landscape and fight in that language. If we don't, we will simply continue to lose, and the stakes are too high right now. Authoritarian movements do not begin with force. They begin with distortion and division. They begin by taking over the stories we tell about ourselves and the world around us, eventually demanding we forsake objective reality. Ultimately, Brian and I discussed the question of identity, who we are as Americans, echoing Penny Ronning and my search for who we are as a moral people. And then, who do we want to be? The world needs better stories, and Pay Love Forward intends to tell them. The world needs better leaders, and Brian Miller is one of them. Record in like 50 different places because I'm scared that I'll have just like the best conversation with somebody and then just, dissipate.
Yeah, no, that happens.
Well, cool, Brian. It's I'm so excited to be talking to you, man. Like this is so fun. Just for a number of different reasons. One, just the opportunity to support your race, your candidacy, the people who are standing up right now, and as far as I'm concerned, defending our country, and you're one of them. And then as well as I think we're going to talk about some really fun things. And so I'm going to just kind of link this into a series that I've been working on called Story as a Form of Nonviolent Resistance. And there's an operational theory, and I'll just kind of describe this operational theory, but it is that essentially democracy or an election it's a story war. And we're competing for the story that resonates the most loudly with the most number of people. And that's such a complex thing. And truly, it's more like a lens to analyze a scenario with, right? Like you can break things down in the constituent parts of a story. And, a story is that there's a problem. And then there's somebody who rises up and addresses that problem and works towards a solution. And then the outcome, there's usually a climax because there's always resistance in the equation. And so then but that is what it is, right? Like we make promises, like we address issues that are occurring in the world. And it's how we tell our stories, because, voters essentially are people who are listening to the stories that we're telling. And so I've been working for a while on Russ Cleveland's campaign with him. And this was like my initiation into politics. I interviewed Russ essentially because my son has Down syndrome and had leukemia twice. And they lost their daughter, Madison, and I think that was Russ's catalyst for jumping into his race. And he's out on the western half, and he's going to take down that seat that Zinke has vacated. And I don't know if you watched that debate, man, but he just filleted Aaron Flint yesterday, and it was so fun to watch. It was just a very enjoyable show.
They had a debate yesterday?
Yeah. It was at a high school gym. I'm not exactly sure where, but I just have seen some clips, and it was just so, it just filled me with joy. Yeah, but it was like an all candidates debate. I'm curious if you have one of those coming up at any point in time, but I'll come cheer you on, man.
Yeah, they're having some debates with Democrats this month coming up, but I don't know of any ones. I mean, I did actually the other day. I went on and did like this. He called it a Wild Wild West debate with Kyle Austin, who's a libertarian candidate for Senate. I did that. It was just him and I, though. It wasn't
Yeah. So this one, there was a bunch of people on the stage. It was a high school gymnasium. They were going from one to the next, and Aaron Flint would say something that was just totally asinine, and then Russ would say something, and it was like one mic drop after another. So that was just pretty enjoyable to watch. But So, and this is something like I've worked with his campaign a little bit, and just to like preface this, man, I'm not part of anybody's campaign. I'm not part of
Yeah.
Russ's campaign, Alani's campaign, your campaign, and so I'm an independent actor. So anything I say, you know, maybe can and will be used against me in a court of law, but should not be used for the purposes of of anybody. Like you're not voting for me, right? So,
No.
but what I've argued though is essentially, and this is what I've communicated to Russ's team, like in this particular race, and this is this is not the general election, so this is he's running against three other candidates, but I've argued that essentially it's like a point counterpoint, right? So there's Russ's story, and then there's the story that everybody else wants to tell about Russ because they're competing with him. Oh, are you with me?
Yeah, I'm still with you.
All right, lost video. And so there's Russ's story. In Russ's story, man, it's one of the most incredible stories that I've encountered. Right? It's like he's a military background, broke his back in the military, had to leave, and then off of pennies, built this business, and it serves children, right? Like it was an after school program that provided just exceptional care. He's a family man. He biked across the country, really in this, like, to take back, some of what was lost, I think, from breaking his back and just the chronic pain and all those things. And does this cross country bike race. And, the love story with his wife is absolutely beautiful. They met on these boats when they were like 14 years old, and then, eventually circled back, and they have this
That's cool when that happens.
yeah. They met as high schoolers, and Russ was like he's a Boy Scout. He's like an Eagle Scout. And it's like they were celebrating their Eagle Scouts, and they were on this boat race around Washington. And then Kate, who's his wife now, was also out there on a boat, and they like kind of followed around / stalked Russ and his friends. But then built this relationship that lasted, and then they came back to that and got married. It's just a beautiful story. But so there's that story, and then there's the story his opponents would like to tell about him, which maybe he's this like rich rancher, like fill in the blank. But it's a story aimed to discredit him. And then what I've argued too is like Ryan Busey, who as you know I absolutely abhor. He wants to tell a story. He's written a book about his life, and anybody who's invested in that race, I'd encourage you to read that book, because it's him selling guns for 25 years and just being a patsy for the NRA, and that's what it was. And then he just stops being a patsy and stops selling guns, and he thinks he should get a prize for it. Like he just sort of stopped being a shitty person. Like he didn't actually do anything meaningful. He just wrote a book and then thought he should be our governor. And I mean, I can read you some quotes from his book. They're really pretty alarming, pretty despicable stuff. But
I've never read his book. I've just met him on the campaign trail once or twice. That's been about it.
Yeah, and so the book's Gunfight. If you're
I've heard of the book. Yeah,
serious about looking into him. But so there's that story, and then there's the story that he wants to tell, that somehow he can work across the aisle and bring people together. And I mean, I would just encourage people to read his book, because if you believe in common sense gun laws, then I mean, he did everything he could to undermine those. If you're a fan of the NRA, well, then he sort of has betrayed you there as well. So I mean, to me and everybody I talk to, man, like I think he's a fairly just unlikable, arrogant, pretty awful person, as far as I can tell. And I don't mind saying that. I went to one of the debates and said that to his face. I was like, man, like you just cannot be the moral authority that our country needs right now. Like, just based on some of the things that you've been involved in. And so then there's, Sam Forstag, and I think so highly of Sam, but he's also a 30-year-old young man, right? And he's got this Bernie endorsement that he's going to have to wear from the primary into the general. And to me, like that's going to hurt him. And so, but all of this is like, how do we tell these stories in a way that sticks and leads to an outcome where we win? I mean, because like we're in this just unbelievably alarming place in our country's history, and that's really what I want to pivot to in a second, which is we're losing democracy. And we're losing democracy, I think, in part because we're losing the story war. I mean, like Donald Trump has figured out a way to rig the airways so that every morning I've got to find out what he had for breakfast. Like the amount of attention that he is able to accumulate has enabled him to amass unbelievable amounts of power. And
Yeah, that's true.
he can get more attention by skipping debates than by attending them. I mean, he demonstrated that in
Well,
front of our eyes. And
now I think with all that stuff. So sorry, my camera went out. I don't know what my camera just did to you there. He's in a bit of a different mode now, I think, though, because he's not doing debates and he's not, now he's clashing up against reality.
mm-hmm.
I mean, if we want to talk about like this, like a story a great example. I don't know, did you see his speech last night? Did you watch his
Oh, I
speech?
missed the one last night, and I try to.
Yeah, so his speech is a great example of what he and I think this ties into what you were saying about the ideas of story. And by the way, I don't with all the I don't follow the District 1 race at all,
No,
and
that's
I
all
know
right.
any of them will be better than Flynn or whoever.
Uh-huh.
But you're supporting Russ, and Russ is a great
Mm-hmm.
guy, and all that. And I'm kind of just watching it. I have my own problems that I worry about over here,
Yeah, yeah.
but
And so I
I
was
think
describing that to just describe. I mean, that is the landscape, and somebody's
yeah.
story has to win there,
Mhm.
and it's not always the person that should win, and we're really demonstrating that, and have been for quite some time.
But I
Uh,
do think all of them would be better than
mhm.
Flint or whoever. I do think that's the case.
I think that's a very reasonable
That's
statement.
my
Yep.
opinion. All of them would be. But getting back to the Iran thing real quick, I mean, you know, uh, it's interesting because this is a very relevant actually
Hmm.
situation to what you're talking about because in the war, there's been a story that's been told about the Iranian American relationship, and basically you've heard pieces of it that have said that we've been at war with them for 47 years. That's not
Hmm.
true. That's completely untrue. We have not been at war with Iran for 47 years. What did happen, if we want to talk about the story, is that there was, I mean, the long and short of it is that in 1953, the United States in the post World War II era overthrew the democratically elected leaders of Iran, installed a dictator that oppressed them for a long, long time. They had a conservative revolution. They wanted him to be brought back to justice. The West refused, and so they took American hostages at the Tehran embassy in 1979. There was back and forth. They never heard them. They returned them. And then we signed an agreement with Iran in the 80s.
Hmm.
And then some of their proxies probably were responsible or Hezbollah was responsible for killing several hundred Marines in Beirut, Lebanon in the early 80s. Other than that, we haven't had problems. They haven't done anything to us ever.
Hmm.
But yet the story that's been told, and that has real consequences, right? Because
Real consequences.
I mean, we've killed our taxpayer dollars have been used to murder Iranian children,
Hmm.
right? I mean, and this gets back to the importance of story. I mean, to cut you off, but it's a great point, and it applies right now. And now you look at Trump's speech that he gave.
Hmm.
He's trying to spin this narrative somehow of victory or some. It's a twist. We could talk more about it later if we wanted to get in the weeds on it. But like at the end of the day, what has happened is that Donald Trump, and this gets in narrative,
Hmm.
because what the Iranians did was they, instead of having this war be about them trying to countermand U.S. military superiority, which they can't do, they switched it to being about the Strait of Hormuz.
Hmm.
And the Strait of Hormuz is a choke point of international commerce. 20% of the
Hmm.
world's oil passes through there. Liquid natural gas, fertilizer. I mean, all these important elements pass through. It's a 20-mile
It
stretch
used to
of
pass through, right?
what's that?
Used to pass through.
Used to, well, some of them still do. They're letting the Chinese and the Indians and some others pass stuff through
Oh,
there.
interesting. Hmm.
Yeah, but it's a 20-mile stretch. The shipping lane is actually only 2 miles, though. So you hear people in the news talk about it being 20 miles wide, but the shipping lane's only 2 miles wide. This is literally a choke point for trade.
Hmm.
And now they control it.
Hmm.
They control it. And it's like having a knife at the neck of the world economy. But you know what? It's war, right? If you're going to try to annihilate someone's country, they're going to do what they have to do to stay alive.
Absolutely.
And what's fascinating about the Iranian situation is that they have really done this very interesting propaganda campaign where they have been reaching directly to Americans
Hmm.
who they know do not like this war and don't want to be a part of it. And they're very much like playing on the politics internally of the United States of America. And I will tell you something, it's very interesting. The Iranian government and their propaganda thing, they are really, I mean, they're a brutal regime and you don't want to give them credit for anything because, I mean, they kill kids for wearing the wrong clothes or something,
Yeah, I mean they're awful. Saddam
it's
Hussein
insane,
was
right?
awful. I mean they're bad leaders.
They're bad leaders, but at the same time, they're hitting into the narratives that a lot of us feel like we don't want to be over there. We don't want our taxpayer dollars killing kids. I don't care what the reason is. No, I'm a hard no on that.
Hmm.
And it's a very interesting, and it just shows, to get to your point, because the Iranians have stolen the narrative from Trump.
Mm.
Look at his speech that he gave last night. He just there's nothing. I mean, it's completely delusional because he's trying to act like a tough guy, trying to act like, oh, I'm going to go back in there and bomb you to the Stone Age. And it was very interesting. He said this today, which is something they said back in Vietnam. He said, "We're going to bomb you to the Stone Age if you don't, come to an agreement." And the Iranians said, "Really? Well, in the Stone Age they didn't have gas. Is that really what you want to go back to? You want to go back to a time when there's no gas flowing?" This is narrative, right? This
Hmm.
is the wars
It's
are
a
being
story
won
war.
through
Yeah,
narrative.
absolutely. That
Hmm.
that that surrounds an actual war in this instance. And I think that part of what I'm trying to tease out here too is that there's this tenuous connection between reality and then the stories that we tell about reality. And another example would be Kristi Noem and what was happening in Minnesota, and Renee
Yeah.
Good and Alex Pretty, and they kill these people, right, in these just indefensible ways. Right? I mean, Alex Padilla, they take a gun from him, and then he's got 7 guys on him, and they shoot him. I don't know how many times, but then immediately attempt to release a narrative about that he was a terrorist, that he was all of these things, and reality is sort of confronting this attempt to, and I love this. I use this quote a lot from 1984, but it's the party's final command was to not believe your eyes and your ears. It was their most essential command. But that now we're sort of being instructed to overlook just the overwhelming evidence that is in front of us, that things are slipping out of control, that we have an administration currently that is authoritarian, that they want to be authoritarian, and they're utilizing, and I think they're utilizing every lever at their disposal to attempt to maintain power and maintain wealth. But story is one of the most important. And I think that there's a microcosm in a local election. That's kind of why I illustrated that. I'm involved in that one. I'm also with Alani too, and now just love hanging out with you too, Brian, and want to learn about your race and about the stories that are surrounding you. But this is it's a lens that we need to take into account, I think, if we're going to reverse some of the damage that
I
is
agree.
ongoing.
Yeah, it's very interesting you mentioned 1984 because I just did a TikTok today, and I posted it on Facebook as well. And I have the video. I could actually even play it. If you gave me a screen share, I could throw it up. But it's very interesting. It was, who Alex Jones is, right?
Hmm.
So Alex Jones, for people who don't know, he's in the InfoWars guys. He's been at,
Hmm.
he was doing Trump stuff before Trump was even a twinkle in anybody's eye, right? I mean, he was doing that kind of messaging and things like that. And and many people would say that a guy like Alex Jones made Donald Trump possible, okay? Well, interestingly, Alex Jones is very, very opposed to the war in Iran.
Hmm.
He really, really wants to see the Epstein files released. It's things he's been talking about for a long, long time. And he had a guest on his show today, and they were on his show talking about how they literally were citing 1984 and saying that, and these are two guys, and he also had a conservative influencer by the name of JP Sears, who's has a large following online.
Hmm.
And he's a comedian. He actually does some pretty funny stuff. His stuff's actually pretty damn funny. I've seen some of it. It's actually very smart. And they were talking about the fact that the administration is trying to tell them to deny what they are seeing, deny what they are hearing with the Iran war. And
Mhm.
this again gets back to the whole idea of, narrative. And they were actually talking about that. They were actually talking about the fact that it was very important to them to have a narrative, to have control of the narrative, and that they did not want people to, you know, to lose sight of what was really going on right now, which is
Mhm.
that the administration, in their view, and these are two people that are longtime, supporters of Donald Trump, want him to be successful. They generally support like the mass deportation policy, which is something, I'm obviously totally against. And it was very interesting. They were talking about this very thing, citing to 1984, and so, yeah, narrative's critical, I think. And I think also we got to bear in mind too that, your narrative is what fundamentally is going to shape your ultimate actions. It's going to
Mhm.
shape ultimately what you're going to accept, what you're going to do, what your motivation is going to be. I mean, I like to get back to the Iran war because it's very timely and it's affecting us all in a very serious
Yeah,
way.
yeah.
And when the two different sides of narrative that we could say there is that, or there's like three different narratives basically. If the Iranian narrative here is that they're in a fight for their life,
Mhm.
they are facing destruction of a they view as, Iran, came from the Persian Empire, and the Iranians are very, very informed of their history, their long history. I mean,
Mhm.
we don't in America, we're more of like short-term people, right? Like we don't really, which is nice in a way because we could be more future oriented, right?
Mhm.
Um, but the Iranians, they think of the Persian Empire from thousands of years ago. They still talk
Mhm.
about the fact that they defeated Alexander the Great. I mean,
Mhm.
these are people that really take a long lens of history, which is not how Americans typically think, if we even know anything about history, right?
Mhm.
And so you have that narrative, and then you have the Israeli narrative, which is that Iran poses an existential threat to Israel, which is actually true because the
Yeah.
Iranians and the Israelis both have said they want to wipe the other one off the map. Okay. So you have those two competing narratives. They're diametrically opposed. And then you have the American narrative. What is the American narrative? And what the narrative that the administration has put out there has been all over the map, as everybody knows. But one time, the first thing they said was, well, the Israelis were going to attack first. We had to attack.
Mhm.
And then they said, no, we needed regime change. Then they said, no, well, we needed to get rid of their nuclear weapons. But then a lot of people said, well, wait a second, you bombed them last year and told us that you destroyed their nuclear program. Did you not
Mhm.
destroy their nuclear program? Or did you? Because now you're saying you didn't destroy our nuclear program. And these questions, by the way, Matthew, are not being asked by some kind of far left people. These are questions being asked by the most conservative
Yeah.
parts of the magosphere, or they used to be parts of the magosphere. I think MAGA as a narrative may be dead now, actually, largely. But so you have, and now, so what is the narrative that the United States has in Iran? And it's nothing,
Mhm.
actually. And this goes back to the Trump speech, because the Trump speech is, it was meaningless nonsense, is what it was. On the one hand, he was saying, well, our war is over. We've degraded their military. We've destroyed X, Y, and Z. They're worthless now. They're nothing. And he said, you know what? Europeans and these other people, you didn't help us get the Strait of Hormuz. So we're bouncing, we're getting out of there, and you go take it. It's not that hard to take it, which is not true. It's extreme. It's impossible task, honestly, to
Mhm.
occupy the Strait of Hormuz. And then, so he said, on the one hand, we're leaving, but then on the other hand, he said, well, but we'll go back and bomb you anytime that we want to. So it's that narrative is nonsensical, and everybody was seeing it was nonsensical.
Mhm.
And the stock market, and again, I mean, narratives feed into the stock market, right? Because like you look at, I mean, Trump was able with these narratives of that things were going to get better, the stocks went up. And then people thought, oh, no, wait, we're going to still have war. The stocks went down. Well, he tried this little trick and it didn't work. The stock market went down. Nobody believes his narrative anymore.
Mhm.
Nobody believes his narrative. Again, getting to your point about the power of narrative, it's like life or death stakes.
Yeah, and I mean, because you can imagine us sliding farther and farther into authoritarianism, and I see that the evidence of that unfolding, and you look at other, like, you look at Russia and Putin and China, and what they do is they control the airwaves. And I think, unfortunately, for our administration right now, is they don't have enough control over who gets to see what. They don't have the internet on lockdown. So there is this, because I think that is how all of these other countries maintain control. You think of North Korea and Kim Jong-un, and I've heard stories about him that he hits a hole in one every time he goes golfing, but they just
Trump, though.
Yeah, yeah, I know, man. Well, yeah, but I think it's something worth teasing out, because there is this disconnect between reality and narrative, and then there are the mechanisms with which you use narrative to control the populace, and they're trying all of these different methods. But I do think that there's something unique about the United States, about our emphasis on freedom, about our Constitution. That was the thing that I was really hoping to kind of pivot to is, and I've been hanging out with Penny Ronning, who's just an amazing person. She works in human trafficking.
I've met Penny. She's great.
She's so amazing. But she keeps asking who we are as a moral people. Like, it's the central question, and I think that those questions are really worth asking as we're sliding towards what we're sliding towards. But who are we as Americans? What does it mean to be American? And Brian, I know you're a historian. I know that
I'm not a historian, but I'm an amateur.
Maybe, maybe a history buff. Maybe
I'm a history nerd.
A history nerd.
History nerd.
But I've spent a significant amount of time looking into the Federalist Papers and the founders, and so I thought maybe we could talk about that. Like who are we as a country? And how did we figure out what our identity was? Where did that come from? And how does that relate to right now?
Yeah. Well, this is, I'm definitely not a historian, but I'm a nerd. And so, yes, I think I told you this. I think I told you this. I've told people this, that the very first thing that I did when I started to seriously think about running. And I don't have like a really exciting story, unfortunately. I tell people I'm kind of like, if you want to get into what my narrative is in this situation, okay, I'm kind of like just a pissed off dad. And I've told people this, I'm kind of being tongue in cheek in this, but sometimes I feel like I'm the middle-aged divorced dad that comes home from a business trip, and the kids have had a kegger at the house, and the dog hasn't been let out. The dog has been shitting all over the house. The kids didn't water the lawn. There's beer cans everywhere. And you're like, what the hell, kids? What did you do?
What happened?
And that's literally how I feel about this whole situation. I was just like watching this like everybody else like a year ago.
Yeah.
And you know what? Trump won. It was more conservative than I wanted but it wasn't insane in the membrane, right? He kind of, there was guardrails on it, and he was kind of like a conservative president of the likes of which we've seen before. And that's just, it comes and goes and whatever. And the funny thing about that is that those guys usually end up being extremely unpopular at the end, which is strange. And he was, and people forgot about that, and he got reelected. And Biden, that's another thing we talk about, the narratives around Biden. So, but anyway, like a lot of people, I was watching this whole situation, and I was just like, this is insane. I've got two kids that are in my 20s. And I'm at a spot in my life where I could, at least just do something. At the time, there was no one else running. Now, I later, found out that my friend Sam Lux, he was also interestingly going through a very similar process at the same time. And it was really funny because, and he's like very different than me. He's a lot younger, and he's got a different background. I'm an attorney. I'm 54. He's 29. He's had his own experiences and things, and he's a farrier and a tech guru. He knows all this. Yeah, he's a really smart guy and a very innovative thinker. And he and I actually met at an event in Great Falls. And it was one of those things like, wait, you're running? It's like, wait, you're running? And it was really funny because neither of us even had heard about the other one.
That's so funny, yeah.
And so that's how I kind of got into that, was just as a sense of like, no one was running, and it seemed ridiculous
Hmm.
that no one was running because, like, I've been a trial attorney for 15 years, and I've tried cases all over the state and all kinds of different stuff. I've always represented like the regular person against corporations and liars and people like that, like bad actors. That's always the stuff I've been into. When I tell a joke sometimes when I'm at campaign events and I say, I'm a lawyer, and you ever seen Better Call Saul? And people usually laugh, and I'm like, I'm not that bad, okay? I'm not that bad. And but it's kind of like just scrappy
Is that your
stuff.
campaign? Better call Brian.
No, that's yeah, Better Call. No, I don't want to link up to Saul too
No,
much.
no.
That could go south with some people. But that guy's kind of ethically challenged. He's an
Ethically
interesting
challenged.
character. Yeah, but anyway, so that's kind of like how, that's kind of like my narrative is really just like, my kids are in their 20s and I'm really close to them. And we talk about all kinds of things. I just try to be like a real person to my kids because I want them to know me. I like to know them. And I'm not one of those ones parents is into like, oh, I know everything. It's like, no, actually, when you get to be an adult, you realize I see I'm a big fan of Socrates because I have a philosophy degree as my undergrad degree. And Socrates' thing was like, the more you know, the more you realize you don't really know anything, right? Because you realize that there's so much more knowledge than any particular human could ever have, right? So I view it as like as you grow up and you see more things, you actually realize that you know less. And you actually realize that the most important thing, or one of the most important things, is connecting with other people, right? So you can't connect with people especially when you're a parent and you're trying to act like you know everything and you're so much smarter because kids, they just kind of sense that and they don't really open up to you because you're not really going to want to open up to someone who's not being vulnerable with you or whatever, right? You're just not going to want to do it. No one's going to want to do it. They're going to be defensive. And so really my whole motivation on my narrative was just kind of like from that point of view is like, look, let's just put up some kind of fight. And I'm used to going into situations and just without really thinking about are we going to win? It's more of just like we're just going to fight. We don't know whether we win or not. That's up to God or whatever you want to call the force that is out there making things happen, right? And sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. So that's kind of like where I sort of came at this and where I am. But it's interesting because the reality of the situation right now, and this is getting into narratives. This is a narrative that I'm trying to work on. I know Sam Lux is trying to work on it, is convincing people that we could actually win this district.
Hmm.
Because I mean, we want to talk about brass tacks on narratives. I
It's
mean,
just baked in there, right? It's like this underlying assumption, and if
yeah,
we don't break that down to some degree, then then it's a foregone conclusion. But like
it's a foregone
it
conclusion.
does not need to be, and I don't sense that. I don't sense that this is unwinnable or that. I mean, I sense incredible unrest and discontent right now.
Oh yeah,
And people are searching, and I mean, Brian, you're saying all the things that like, I mean, I got into supporting Russ and Alani like because I looked around and like our country is on fire and our democracy is on fire and like somebody has to do something about this
correct.
and so just have so much admiration, Brian, for that story you're telling. Like you're
Well,
talking to your kids and like
I don't think it's that big of a deal, but I think a lot of people would do it if they had the time. I'm just at a time in my life, I've been practicing for 15 years, and when you get to this point in civil practice, you have more mastery over your schedule, right? I
mhm,
mean, I have to show up in court and do things I can't, there's deadlines, but other than that, you're kind of in a place where when someone gets to the point where I am, you have more flexibility on doing things.
mhm,
So it's just to me, it's just basic, and I think a lot of people would do it. I don't. I think a lot of people, if they had this, were in this spot, they would do it
mhm,
too. But that's just where I'm coming at from it, and getting back to this narrative in District Two, it has. I mean, there's the way I look at it right now is that it has been a lost district for several cycles, but it's by no fault of Kenneth's. I mean, like Penny, I've met Penny. She's great. She really tried to run
mhm,
out there. You've had some others that have given us Kathleen Williams, I think. Well, that was when it was one district, but there's been people, Democrats that have tried. But the problem that I think Democrats in Montana have had is just that the way the national party has been drifting and going is just out of sync with a lot of Montana voters. And so they just didn't, I think a lot of Montana people look at Democrats and just be like, no, thank you. That's just not, we can't identify with that, except for Tester. Tester broke that mold,
Yeah.
and Steve Bullock broke that mold. And so there were some examples of that. But, when I moved here in the late 90s, and you've been here your whole life, it was a very different state in the 90s and 2000s. It was much more bipartisan and whatnot. And Republicans were very rational back then. They weren't crazy. They were conservative, but they weren't, but they had principles. They were people of honor. And under Trump, that's just been destroyed. That's just been absolutely destroyed. The sense of honor, the sense of integrity. In my opinion, there's only like one or two Republicans in DC that seem to have any personal integrity. Thomas Massey in the House, who's Kentucky, and Rand Paul in the Senate. He's okay, although sometimes he's waffly. But Thomas Massey does not waffle. Thomas Massey is a principal. I disagree with him on economic policy and things like that. But he is principled. He has integrity. There's a person there that you could talk to, as opposed to when someone just cares about power, there's nobody there. You have no integrity. You're nobody. You're nothing. You're just a conduit for power, and you're just going to say or do anything that needs to be done to get power, right? That's no way for a human to live. But getting back to the District 2 thing, it has been a lost district, and it's through no fault of these candidates like Penny and others that have run in there. It's just these underlying conditions, I feel, that have been there. But those have shifted, right? So the fact that this district is competitive has nothing to do with me or Sam Lux. It has everything to do with these conditions that have been happening and what Trump has done and what Troy Downing hasn't done, right? The things he hasn't done for people. And so those things are coming together now. And so I think there is an opportunity here. However, in my opinion, there's this weird kind of disconnect. Democrats in the central committee level, at the grassroots level in District 2, I think more of them are believing that this is a winnable race. I don't know how the inside party structure and like the dark money type structure, which is something I know Russ is always talking about on social media. I don't know if those folks see it as winnable. But all I know, and I think Sam and I are friends, we talk a lot. I don't know Windy Boy at all. He just got in the race. I don't really know him. But Sam and I think, are just both believe that it's winnable, and that there's this momentum that's out there right now that hasn't been there before. So now.
But you're describing a few different things. One, you're describing, just an area of the country that has maybe conservative values, right? And historically has aligned that with Republican values. And I think that what we're watching is like those two things are separating very, very quickly.
Yes.
What it is that Republicans once cared about and once stood for, and the reality of the current administration. And so there's this
Correct.
cognitive dissonance that's just playing out in reality. And then there has to also be a viable alternative. And that also has to be communicated in such a way that people are willing to maybe make different choices, right? And I think explore other opportunities. And I think that's our job too. And this is all so experimental. I launched my podcast originally just to elevate some of the heroes in our community. I do mentorship. I do compassionate communities. I never had any interest in politics until this dumpster fire unfolded around me. And I just refused to hand this world to my children. My son has Down syndrome. He's beaten leukemia twice. And I know Russ and I both got involved in this after those massive cuts to pediatric, cancer research. And that just is like, I can't hand this world to my kids. And so have kind of repurposed a lot of the things that I'm doing, and would love to exit as well, personally, because this is not my calling necessarily. It just is a crisis in our country. People can feel that. And then my question, Brian, is how do we connect to enough people out there who are feeling this dissonance and this discontent in a way that because like the stakes are really high right now. Like if we
They
don't
are
make
high.
serious strides in November and rebuild some of the checks and balances, I'm
Yep.
extraordinarily afraid of what the future looks
Yeah.
like for our country.
Yeah, it's not gonna go well. Well, first off, I think that, we're talking about Eastern District of Montana, which is a tougher district, but nationally, I think unless the Trump administration figures out how to just rig the hell out of the elections, that the Democratic Party
Hmm.
will come back into power. And I think we see people all over the country, sort of a new sort of generation, a new attitude in Democrats, like Graham Plattner up in Maine, for instance. He had some controversy because he had
Hmm.
said some pretty rough things when he was getting out of he was in military service in Iraq and saw some tough things, and his head wasn't on straight, and he had like some kind of tattoo that he got drinking one night that apparently was some kind of Nazi tattoo. And but it was interesting because Graham Plattner went out there and he said, "Hey man, I'm sorry." He's like, My head was messed up back then. I got out of a war. I was drinking a lot. I was doing drugs." And you know what? People appreciated that. He's actually leading everybody. He's
Hmm.
beating the establishment candidate and he's beating the Republican candidate because people want it. And I think that like one of the
Hmm.
key things, and it's something that I try to do as a candidate, is just be yourself. Just be
Um,
authentic. I don't try to, for me, what that means, and this just comes naturally to me, is the positions that I take. I'm not saying they're right. I don't know if they're right. I have no idea if they're right. All I know is that they're positions that I take because I came to them on my own. I
hmm.
didn't have somebody, I don't get my positions because somebody in a party or someone somewhere told me what to think. I come up to and I can explain why I have particular views on things,
Hmm.
right? I think that a lot of people see politicians of both parties and they just don't they stay fake, like when you get a tough question as a politician, what many of them do on both parties is they just switch into robot mode
Hmm.
and they just say something that's like a robotic answer that everybody knows is not giving you any real information
Hmm.
instead of engaging it. And I think that naturally alienates people, right? Because
Hmm.
I think of it like this. Imagine if you had somebody in your life, like say a partner or your spouse, and every time you asked them a tough question, they just gave you a robot answer.
Hmm.
You wouldn't want to hang around that person, right? But yet we tolerate it in our politics, right? We tolerate the automatic robotic answers and everybody does it. And I
Hmm.
think for me, one of the keys in trying to win, trying to provide some new information. And you know what? Conservatives can do this too. That's why I have tremendous amount of respect for Thomas Massey
Hmm.
because he's just real. He's just a real guy. Like he just calls it straight. Maybe you disagree with him on things. I know I do. I agree with him on Epstein files. I agree with him on the Iran war. I agree with him on some of these other things. I disagree with him. Some things he says, I think, wow, that's insane. I can't agree with that at all.
Hmm.
But nevertheless, it's coming by it honestly, right? And I think that is one key element. But I think the wild card in all this, and just that we don't know, is people have been conditioned by fear-based propaganda coming out of the Republican Party for a while now. And is very interesting. So I did a interview talk show. There's this guy Kyle Austin. He's a nice guy. He's in
Hmm.
Billings, and he was a Republican, and he's running as a Libertarian for United States Senate. And he sent out this email to all the candidates, and he wanted to have a wild west debate. No moderator, no holds barred, just whatever. And I saw it, and I was like, "Great, dude! I love this stuff. Are you kidding me? Like I've been yelled at by people my whole life. Like I could care less,
Yeah,
right?"
yeah.
So, and I was in Billings for some work. So this earlier this week, so I went by and did it, and it was very interesting, and I really enjoyed it. It was fun. I'm going to do it again. I thought it was good,
Mm.
and it was interesting because there were areas where he and I were having like just really interesting rational conversations, like for instance on healthcare. I
Hmm.
basically said to him, I said, "So what do you?" I said, "So you don't want the government involved? You want a private insurance company to tell you what to do?" And he actually had a very thoughtful answer to that. He
Hmm.
actually wants to have like a different system that's almost like a nonprofit system. And then we had
Hmm.
a cool conversation. But then it was funny because he would go to these like things about like these anti-Democrat talking points and start saying, well, the Democrats are doing this and the Democrats are doing that. And it was almost like this like robotic attack mode thing
Yep.
that went on. And it was fine. I didn't care. I just because a lot of things his information was off. And I just said, dude, like that's not right. And I of course like did my argument. But it's that kind of mode, I think, that people that has
Mm-hmm.
really conditioned people a lot. And I'm not saying Democrats haven't done it, but what's interesting though is that Democrats historically have not been good at using fear as a motivator, but Republicans have.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I say to people on the campaign trail is I'm not afraid to use fear, but it needs to be rational fear, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're out hiking in the backcountry and you come across a grizzly bear, rational fear will keep you alive.
Mm-hmm.
Rational fear will stop you from running off and screaming and doing something stupid, which could get you killed. And in all kinds of situations, rational fear is okay because it's coming in. But as long as you're not using it to manipulate people, you're just saying like, hey, you
Mm-hmm.
should be worried about this, dude. Like you should be worried about the national debt. You should be worried about authoritarianism. You should be worried about these things. This is not going to be good for you. You're not going to like this. That kind of use of fear is acceptable because you're using it rationally, you're discussing. But the way the Republican Party has traditionally used it is like basically scapegoating and race baiting and stuff like that. And the immigration stuff is a great example of that. The immigration thing is just like pure race baiting. It's pure race baiting. All of the statistics show that US citizens commit crimes at higher rates
Mm-hmm.
than legal immigrants and unlawful immigrants.
Mm-hmm.
That's what all of the statistics show. So you guys like you and I are committing higher density of
Like
crimes
quite a lot from the data I looked at.
by a
Yeah.
fair number. But the Republicans, what they do is they see a immigrant comes in and rapes somebody. Okay. None of us want that. We all want that guy arrested. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? But what
Mm-hmm.
they do is they say, this whole class of people, this is what this class of people is like. And that's a fear-based narrative.
Mm-hmm.
And it's false. And then now we see, because we have this mass deportation policy,
Mm-hmm.
and there's lots of statistics on
Well,
this, and like for
and using it to drive the Save Act as well, with this
using for the
idea
Save
that
Act.
illegal
Yep.
immigrants are stealing our elections, and the data just suggests something completely different.
Oh,
And
please
there
do.
are also significant concerns about the integrity of elections.
Sure.
What Russia has attempted to do in our elections is horrifying. And so
Yeah.
there are real concerns, but instead using this, like you said, race bait to drive this specific narrative, they're utilizing that, to propel a narrative that drives policies that keeps them in power.
Mhm.
But it has nothing to do with what's actually unfolding on the ground. And again, this is that disconnect between, reality and then the story that we're either being fed or we can choose to do something about that.
And this is a tough one. I mean, this is one I'm taking on directly in my campaign. I'm going straight, and this is like a really nuts and bolts narrative thing, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
what the Democratic Party has done is they've just been timid and weak on immigration. They just
Mm-hmm.
haven't they like have this kind of like sympathy for immigrants, but they don't really take the beast on directly. They don't really go straight up and say, you know what, that's race baiting. Knock it off. We
Mm-hmm.
have an immigration problem. Let's
We do.
solve our immigration problem.
Yeah, yeah.
I just did a post on this just the
Mm-hmm.
other day, and like this is what I say. This is the narrative that I use. I say, look, do immigrants commit crimes? Yes. Do U.S. citizens commit crimes? Yes. U.S. citizens commit a higher rate per capita than immigrants. Okay. Therefore, there was no logical relation between that one immigrant who created a crime and the whole group. There's
Mm-hmm.
no relationship. There's zero relationship. However, the conservative fears of immigration have some background validity to them. But this gets lost in the narrative structure because Democrats just say, "Oh, we hate Trump, we hate this or whatever," and so
Mm-hmm.
everybody loses. So what I say is, look, and I just posted this just I think yesterday or today on Facebook. Look, we need to have a secure border. That's just basic common sense. And when I've gone to campaign events to talk to Democrats, and I've said this from the beginning. The Biden-Harris border policies were disaster. And I have
Mm-hmm.
Democrats say, well, that's not really true. It wasn't really open borders. And I'm like, yeah,
It's
It was
pretty
open
bad.
borders. I've seen the
Hmm.
video. I've seen the video of people stream, and I was like, listen, if you're in Texas and you got like waves of people coming in and you don't know who they are, you damn straight you should be worried. Anybody would be worried. But yet the Democrats just kind of like poo-poo that stuff, and that's off. So we have to, I do it, acknowledge the critique,
Yeah.
acknowledge that and say it's valid. And then on the other hand, the other thing that conservatives they're on the right track, but they miss it because they're going fear-based is we can't have unlimited immigration. It's not
Hmm.
feasible. The United States of America has 5% of the world's population. We can't let everybody in the world come into the United States of America. It is not feasible. At some point in time, some of these other countries do need to get their acts together. They
Hmm.
really do. I mean, that's just common sense. However, we have a need for immigrant labor,
Hmm.
and we do have a tradition of being a refuge for people, right? We
Hmm.
have that tradition. So this is going to be a narrative that we're going to be battling on in 2026 and 2028. And this is something that you had mentioned earlier that we wanted to get to, is who
Yo,
are we as
who's the
Americans?
nation? Yeah.
Are we still the Americans that want to be a
Hmm.
beacon of liberty? Or you see it sometimes, the Statue of Liberty, and they say under Trump, is surrounded by barbed wire and she's got a machine gun and she's mowing people down. Well, who do we
Hmm.
want to be? Who do we want to be? And I think that what when I look at
Maybe
the
possibly a
polling,
balance between those two extremes, like neither of those things, right? We don't want to be a place that just like just it doesn't matter who you are or where you're from, just
we
come on
can't.
over. But
We
we
can't.
also don't want to, barbed wire and machine guns is a horrible way to engage with people who are hurting. But Brian, I want to kind of break down because I've heard you say just a number of things, and one is that authenticity matters. I mean, that was kind of your
Mhm.
starting place. That what
Yeah.
you try to do or what you try to bring to this campaign is you are authentic. Like you're not always right.
No.
You're not perfect. You're not any of those things. But when
No.
Brian shows up, it is just Brian. It's not
It's
what
just Brian,
you're
whether
what
that's good or bad, I don't know.
well, yeah, what the party told Brian to say, or what
No.
this or that, and then,
No.
but out of that like sense of identity and authenticity, that enables you to be a critical thinker. And to me, this is one of the massive problems with the way that narrative is disconnected from reality is we're no
Mhm.
longer able to really critically analyze. And I mean, this has everything to do with AI and with
Mhm.
with fake news and disinformation because it's really difficult to ascertain what reality is right now. But we
Mhm.
have to, and we have to elevate people who are capable of telling the difference. And I mean, this is one of my problems with our just constant attack on, what the medical system, on expertise, on education, all of these different facets that we actually need people who are capable of critically thinking and figuring out, what reality actually is and what it's not, so that we can solve these problems, so we can address
Yep.
these problems. Because, an immigration policy that's just built around how much fear we can generate in the populace is not going to be it's not going to be an effective immigration policy.
Well, and this is what we're seeing right now because it's very, I was so just so you know, we kind of mentioned this, but like I've worked on this issue a long time. I'm not an immigration attorney,
Mm,
but I've served as co-counsel on the most significant immigration related cases in Montana history. And I worked with an immigration attorney who knew the other side of things, and I did the civil litigation part and things like that. So this is an issue, the abuse of government power against immigrants on a fear-based rationale, something that I've been familiar with and I've
mhm.
fought against just in my professional life. So it's something I give a lot of thought to, right? And so what's interesting, and I've been saying this from the beginning, is that look, if we do this mass deportation policy and all this stuff, it's going to really hurt us. And now you're seeing it. I mean, you're seeing stories all over the place of labor shortages.
Mhm.
Now, the narrative that you heard from the MAGA crew was that, hey, those immigrants are taking your job, and as soon as we get the immigrants out of there, all these people, these Americans are going to fill these jobs. Nope, that's not how
Wow.
economics works. I mean, and this just shows you, and gets to your point. When you use fear,
Hmm.
you're not using reason. And reason is how functional systems are built. Fear does not build functional systems. Fear can sort of give people this rush and get them doing something, like the Third Reich, massive buildup, but it's not a sustainable system. It's not a system that's going to have endurance. systems built on reason and logic and science, those are systems which have sustainability and endurance in them, right?
Hmm.
So on an economics thing, that's not how economics works. You just get rid of some guys because you know what? You have to have a worker that's willing to do the job. You have to have a
Hmm.
worker that knows how to do the job. You have to have a worker that's able to do the job. Okay. You have those are specific criteria you have to meet. So you don't
Hmm.
just like magically fill positions when you eliminate the worker. That does not, and anybody who studies economics knows that is true.
Hmm.
Replacing jobs is not always so easy. And the other thing that happens too, and we're going to see this, is that when you take jobs away, there's this unrealized capacity now, and there's a limited time to fill that job. And if too much time goes by, the
Poof. I mean,
production
it just goes
capacity
away.
that
Yeah.
supported that job
Hmm.
also disappears. Why? Because no income's coming in.
When
Okay.
you can think about that on a micro level, right? Like you have a small business and they make cookies, right? And maybe they've hired a number of illegal immigrants, right, or something like that for a number of different reasons, and so all of a sudden we deport all of those workers because they were
Yeah.
the ones that were there making the cookies, and then there's a period of time where that store, that cookie factory, whatever it is, can sustain itself. But if nobody replaces those jobs, nobody replaces that income stream, the cookie store just goes away.
Well,
And
and your cookie example is interesting because it's possible in the cookie example that you could find workers to replace that, right?
Mhm.
Because it's not like a specialized skill. But agricultural work is extremely difficult
It's
and
really
taxing.
interesting. Hmm.
And a lot of people don't want to do that. It's
Hmm.
back-breaking labor. Now, a lot of immigrants are willing to do and this gets into we've got to get into the microdynamics of economics, right?
Hmm.
Why are a lot of immigrants willing to do this backbreaking labor? You know why? Because they've got families back in their
Hmm.
home countries, and the wages that they're making in this backbreaking labor is a lot. It is supporting people that they love and care about back home.
Hmm.
They are motivated to do this, okay? They're motivated to go live in like crowded conditions, packing five or
Hmm.
six people in an apartment where a lot of like regular American citizens would say, well, it's too crowded. I'm not living there. Okay. Well, back in their home country, they stack in a little bit better. They're used to that. So you see, it's not so simple as these people want to make it. There's nuances. And if you fail to appreciate the nuances, reality is going to bite you in the
Hmm.
ass. And that's what we're going to see. And we're going to have to work through that now. And I hope that what we do, and this is the second part of what I say to people, I acknowledge the legitimate concerns of the conservatives on
Hmm.
immigration. And I say, but look, let's go to Congress and have this debate. Like, for
Hmm.
example, how do we want to deal with the guy that came over illegally, but he's been here for 5, 10 years and he's a solid member of the community? Do you really want to deport him? Or what about the guy that came over, maybe had a DUI, maybe he had a domestic violence thing, maybe he had a non-violent possession crime? Do we really want to deport him? That there you might get into some nuance.
Yep.
Obviously, murderers, rapists, man, nobody wants these people in the United States. I mean,
No.
but that has been used, and
But
part
but
of the
again,
reason.
you're introducing just the unbelievable amount of nuance and complexity that reality holds,
Correct.
and just even to because it's almost problematic, Brian. Like because we can break this down, we can look at cookie stores or agriculture and talk about microeconomics and macroeconomics, and then and probably never actually achieve the kind of soundbite that's going to get out there in the milieu in the way that seems to be swaying voters right now. Like because reality is really complex and you have
Yeah.
to really, really work hard and really educate yourself and really be critical to find functional solutions. And
Correct.
this is this reality that I'm very, very concerned about right now, Brian. And because I want to win. Like I think
Yeah.
we have to. And I've identified man, I've identified like three just phenomenal candidates right now, as far as I'm concerned. And this is just me again. Nobody's voting
Yeah.
for me. These are my opinions.
I know myself too well, so I'm always skeptical when somebody. No, but here's the thing. There's different gears. There's different gears. I
Mhm.
mean, and the thing is too is that the persuasion and political sphere, it's a multidimensional thing.
Mhm.
Okay. So I'll just tell you, like, so you and I are having a higher level conversation here,
Mhm.
And like when I first started campaigning, and I don't mean that we're superior, I'm just meaning we're getting into the
Yeah,
nuances. I'm
yeah.
not saying you and I are smarter than anyone. We're just having what is a
Hmm.
little higher level conversation, right?
Hmm.
Some people are going to love this. Some people are going to hear this and say, this is great. We want to get in the nuances. When I first started campaigning, I would take these PowerPoint presentations, and I told you about this, and one of the things I talked about, and this was back in the fall, was how we were seeing a third wave of Ku Klux violence right now in the United
Hmm.
States of America. And I had graphics, images from the two waves of the Ku Klux and history stuff and source documents and all these things.
Hmm.
And, a lot of people loved it. And I always said, hey, look, I know that this type of thing is not really going to persuade some guy who's just
Hmm.
struggling to make it. I get that. But somebody at some point in time needs to talk about this. There needs to be groups of people that are talking about it at a thoughtful level because we need to support each other and we need to have an exchange of ideas.
Hmm.
But then there's different gears, right? And this is where the politics comes in. And this is where I think the challenge of being a candidate comes in.
Hmm.
And let me give you just a great example of this, a very simple example that I think anybody that's easy to relate to. When Abraham Lincoln was running for Senate in Illinois in 1858, he was running against Stephen Douglas. And Stephen Douglas was a very, very well-known figure. He was already a senator, and had a national profile, and he had been a judge, and he'd been in Congress. He was a national figure, and he was kind of like an apologist for slavery. And the
Hmm.
narrative that he had was very, very interesting. And this gets into this narrative thing again, is that he said, look, I don't care what they do in Alabama with their slaves. I don't care if New York wants to have freedom. I don't care if Rhode Island wants to let Black people vote. I don't care. Every state can do its own thing, okay? And this was a argument of moral relativism, basically. It was saying we don't care what slavery's really doing. The thing we're cared about is the respect of the states. And by the way, as Republicans today will always point out, those were Democrats arguing for slavery, okay? Just saying that. I always hear that all the time. They always say, well, Democrats used to argue for slavery. And I'm like, okay, yeah, like 150
Well,
years
there's
ago,
a
right?
bit of an inversion at some point in history
Yeah, it
where
was,
the
well,
Republicans
Lincoln
used
was
to
the
actually
guy.
have much more democratic values and vice versa, which is
No,
just,
yeah,
I love the
but I'm
history.
just saying, like Republicans always say
Uh-huh.
that.
Yeah.
Well, it was 150 years ago, though, dude. I mean, come on. Anyway, but they love to say that. So anyway, but then Lincoln comes along, and what Lincoln does in the narrative structure is he's making a moral argument against slavery.
Mhm.
He's making a moral argument, and the other element that he throws into his argument, the basic element, is he says, "Look, slavery is going to tear the Union apart. We can't be half slave and half free. We're going to be one or the other."
Mhm.
Okay. And it was a very interesting argument because he knew that the United States would never be a completely slave nation. Like that was self-evident. So he was kind of it was a very it was a very subtle argument. However, what Lincoln did so Stephen Douglas and Lincoln had this very famous series of debates in Illinois, the Lincoln Douglas debates,
Mhm.
and and everybody knows about them now. And they transcribed every word of them, and everybody read them in the entire. I mean, they were big news. People were reading them in New York and everything because the Telegraph. By the way, can you imagine? And here's just to set the stage. The format was this: the first guy goes for an hour, the second guy goes for an hour and a half, and the third guy goes for half an hour. No moderator, just two dudes duking it out on slavery in front of a raucous audience of hundreds of people. Okay, like, if I'm the general election candidate, I hope we do that again. I'm not a snowflake, dude. I want to see a raucous crowd of Montanans, and
Let's get a little wild, right?
Downing won't do it, but the libertarians and those guys,
Uh-huh.
they will do it. And it'll be fun. And the independents, we'll have fun with it. Downing won't. He's chicken shit. He won't do it. But he might show up to one if it's a safe space for Troy Downing. I mean, he might show up at a safe space. But
That's
anyway,
so ironic, man.
isn't
I
it
love
ironic?
that.
They're the ones that need the safe space now. We're the
Uh-huh.
ones that are throwing
Oh, we were
down.
down there last week at the skate park, man. That's the gnarliest spot in
Let's
Billings,
do a
right?
skate park debate. We'll do a skate park debate.
Uh-huh. Well, dude, I'll set that up all day, man.
Yeah, the interesting people will come in and ask questions. But anyway, so that's what you had, okay? And I also think it's interesting to think that like you think so there's 3 hours of debate. Okay, think about this is like 1858. The guys had to write it all down, and then they had to go to the telegraph office and send the shit by telegraph. It's nuts. They got it done though. Okay. They got this stuff done. So everybody was reading these things. Well, what Lincoln did, and Douglas criticized him for this, is when Lincoln was up in Chicago in the North, he was like giving this abolitionist, hardcore anti-slavery argument. But then when he went to the South, and this most southern town was Cairo, Illinois, he gave this different argument. He had a different gear. He wasn't pushing the moral element, and he was pushing this sort of almost like this. He was almost pushed this economic argument, saying, "Hey, slave states have this unfair competitive advantage against you white guys here in Illinois. This isn't fair." So the thing is that he modulated his message depending on where he was, and Douglas actually relentlessly attacked him for that. And they all knew what they were saying in all these towns. And he was saying, "Oh, you're so fake, Lincoln. You say this thing up in Chicago, you say this thing down in Cairo." But what Lincoln was doing was he was recognizing that there's different gears. And it's not that you're being fake. It's just that there's different things that are hitting people in different spaces. So like, for example, with this stuff, with immigration thing, you know, I just have a very simple argument, which is that basically this is screwing up our farm economy and it's wrong. You know, and everybody, and here's the thing with this, and I hope we win this argument, but maybe we don't. People in Montana have not had negative experiences with immigrants. I mean, most of the experiences of immigrants in Montana have been positive. And I would love to also be able to make the argument, although I think it's not really something that's going to work, that the Irish used to be persecuted just like the Hispanics today. I would hope that Catholics and Irish would say, "Hey, yeah, they did it to us before. This isn't right. Let's just solve this problem legally with a new law, whatever that law looks like." But the challenge of the candidate, and this is the challenge that I think of, and I think about it all the time, is without being fake, without tacking to the right or whatever the hell they call it, how do I potentially win over people? How do I potentially break through to certain people? And I will tell you just like some examples. So like I've been very, very hardcore against the state of Israel for a while. And when I used to talk about this at events, I got people saying, "Hey, that's anti-Semitic. That's you shouldn't say that." And I was like, look, I'm not saying, obviously I am against anti-Semitism in all of its forms. And this is not, we should never be using this to have hatred against Jews or even the state of Israel, okay? It's just saying what the state of Israel doing is unacceptable and we want nothing to do with them and we shouldn't be giving them money. And if they want to go kill Iranians and they want to go kill these other people, that's kind of their business. I wish they wouldn't do it, but I can't stop them from doing it. I can just pray for them and hope that they don't do that. I don't want to be a part of that though. And a lot of people in the MAGA universe, they like that because that's how they feel. Also, Epstein files. I talk about Epstein files. I mean, Trump started a war to get us off Epstein. As soon as this war's over, we're going to get right back to, he's going to be shocked how nobody forgot about Epstein.
Yeah, I don't think that one's going
He's not going
away.
to like that very much because we're going to go right back to Epstein. Everybody's waiting to get that. I talk about Epstein too. And I say, I want all those files released. And you know what? I want to know why the Obama administration didn't look into this. I want to know why the Clinton, I don't care who's in the damn file. I don't care. Again, I believe that. And those are the kinds of messages. Now, they might not be with me on immigration or whatever, but some of these other things, they might say, well, you know,
Well, I wonder about this too, Brian, you know, because I think dark money has played such a massive role in politics, you know, and because I do think money shapes narrative, right? Like you can just blast your message, your face, your brand, and you can use money to do that. But money, you know, there's no such thing as free money. And so, you know, you just see these things that they're almost just impossible to understand. Like, why have we not released these files? They've been, you know, like multiple administrations on both ends of the aisle, and still like here we are, and it's almost nonsensical. Like it doesn't make any sense, you know, outside of the reality that we just have like foxes in the henhouse, right?
Yeah.
And on both sides of the aisle, and so to me, this is one more. It's one more barrier to to seeing somebody like yourself, somebody like Russ, because you're not bought and paid for. And I mean, I think that we live in a society that really favors elevating people that are bought and paid for, because it protects the establishment. And man, that's a winning argument on both sides, right? Like we are tired of.
I know.
We are so tired of that, right?
Well, this gets into an interesting topic that I've thought a lot about.
And APAC and like, I mean, all this stuff, like what are we doing as a country? Like, we don't want this. We don't want our representatives, our leaders, to be bought by somebody else that doesn't care about what we care about.
Well, now people don't. Now that's happening. I mean, I just saw a supporter of mine just sent me a story the other day about how all these Democrats are distancing themselves from APAC. And she said, wow, you were talking about this a while back. And I was like, yeah, but this is an interesting topic. And this is how I think about this whole money thing. And it's just complicated. Okay. Because there's all this money out there, and money, essentially the way I look at it, is it buys attention. That's what you're doing when you're spending money in politics. You're buying attention. You're putting stuff where people are paying attention, and you're hoping to get their attention with money. So that's how that works, obviously, right? Now, I don't have much money. And this gets back to the whole thing about like, A, I'm an unknown candidate. I've never run for office before. And B, a lot of people just look at this race and they're like, oh, you're going to lose anyway. I'm not going to waste my money. And I can't sit there with a straight face and tell somebody that I haven't been able to sit there and tell them they're wrong. I'm not going to, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to sit there and say, oh no, I'm going to win. I mean, I don't know if I'm going to win. Right. And I've been criticized for that. People said, don't say that. And I'm like, well, but I'm just being honest, man. Like, I don't know. Okay, I'm trying, but I don't know. But what's interesting is this, and a journalist that I did an interview with early on told me this. And this was an interview I did like several months ago. And this is someone that's been watching politics for decades in Montana. And they told me, they said, there's a level of attention out there that has not existed before. People are looking for something. They are looking for something very specific. So it's an interesting question if a low budget candidate like myself or Sam Lux, who I view as also in the similar vein to me, he and I share a lot of values, how much money do we really need to win in this environment? Because I'll tell you something very interesting. There was a Texas Senate race back in February. I think it was Senate District 9 in Texas. I maybe didn't get the number, but it was a Senate district in Fort Worth, Dallas area. And this is a very interesting story. Okay, so this was a Democrat hadn't won this state Senate seat, not a statewide, not a U.S. Senate, but a state Senate seat, right? So it's a smaller thing, but it's Texas, so it's a lot of people in the Senate district in Texas. And it's a Democrat hadn't won that since the 70s. All right. It was like a plus 15 Republican seat. And the woman who held the seat was a well-known conservative activist. Earned her stripes getting school boards in Texas to ban books. I guess they like that shit there. I don't, whatever. Right. And there were probably books on evolution or some science or something like that. So anyway, like that's who the guy was beating. And then like in the days of the election, in the final stretch, she had the Democratic lieutenant governor stumping for her. She had Trump send out 3 messages to his group within like 48 hours of the election. So, and the Republicans spent $2.5 million in that election. Okay. Now, the Democrat guy, so he was down, as a plus 15 Republican seat. He only had $250,000 behind him. He won by 17 points. Wow. Yeah. So he was outspent 10-1, and he went up 34 points. And so I think that's a signal that there is something going on, and this gets into your domain, in the collective subconscious, the collective mind, where they're looking for something, and money isn't going to change that. Now, the challenge, however, is that nobody knows who the hell I am. Nobody knows who the hell Sam Lux is. I mean, and that's where if we had money we could at least let, and maybe not
You
just
can
money.
buy name recognition. Like it's almost
Let's
something you can go purchase that,
At
right?
least you can get people to know. Now, there's other ways you don't need money, like volunteer. So if anyone
Mm-hmm.
watching this is liking this and wants to help me, get in touch with me because I have another strategy I'm working on right now to work on that between now and the primary. Okay, that doesn't cost money; it just costs time. But again, this gets back to the thing: getting people who are willing to volunteer. I mean, if I just had like 100 solid volunteers, dude, I could probably win this primary.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't, it's just getting that level of commitment is just a challenge in this district
Mm-hmm.
and me not knowing anybody.
Mm-hmm.
But this gets back into the whole thing of narratives, and it's just such a great point that you raise, and it just applies in so many different levels here. So
Yeah,
many
yeah. I
levels.
mean, it's like a holistic lens that you can analyze things from. It's not the only one. I mean, like I'm
No.
obsessed with game theory. That's another
Oh,
phenomenal
yeah.
way to analyze an election. But this one it taps into the things that at least my background is. My PhD's in counselor education, so I mean it's a psychology degree. But I'm always looking at mental heuristics and cognitive bias and why do people pay attention to the types of information that they pay attention to. And I'm trying
Right.
to bring that background to kind of help you guys. Like I don't know if it's working. Like once again, we're in that same boat where it's like I'm gonna throw spaghetti at the wall.
Yeah.
Because that's what I have right now. Like I don't have some massive
Right.
platform. I don't have millions of dollars I can donate to a candidate. I have like my experiences and I'm building this platform and really trying to explore and like that. I mean that's what we're doing right now. I figured Brian's gonna be
Correct.
real fun to talk to. If it's on camera or off camera, so why not just
We've had great conversations. I love talking to you too, dude. Sometimes you just instantly vibe with people, and that's just nice.
I know, man, for sure.
Right.
And so, like, but let's live stream this, and then I'm looking at ways to like band platforms together. I mean, Alani's all
Yeah.
for this. I mean, Russ has been on my podcast, and it's like if we can aggregate our collective impact and influence, then we can get people to pay attention to new things. And I think like to echo what you're saying, they're hungry to pay attention to new things
Right.
because we really visibly see how poorly things are working for us. I mean, the billionaires are just getting more billions, and the rest of us are struggling to pay for insurance and really worried about how we're going to put food on our families' tables. And that is like we can really see that, right? Like how many
Yeah.
billions does Elon Musk really need, right? Like
Well,
a
he needs to become the world's first trillionaire.
trillionaire,
So
right?
he needs 1,000 billion.
1,000 of them. That's a lot of billions, right?
Well, he needs it. He deserves it. We need to all be debt slaves and war slaves so that Elon Musk can be the world's
Can be
first
the words.
trillionaire. I think that's a great way to spend our lives, don't you?
Yeah. It's still like I
Yeah,
want to laugh, but it's so freaking tragic.
well,
Like what
you
is
better laugh. You don't want to cry
uh,
because you want to laugh because but yeah. Well, look, I appreciate what you're doing here because this is, we get started. And I'll tell you, I mean, I don't know if I'm going to get through the primary. I have
mhm,
no idea. It's a wild card right
mhm,
now. But all I can say is that if I do get through the primary and I'm the nominee, like I'm going to be ramping this up to level 11
mhm,
because, and just to get to the dynamic here, I do think because we are talking about a race at the end of the day, that's the reason why you and I are here
mhm,
talking because I'm a candidate for a race. I do think people should be aware that I understand that right now in the primary, it's like, yeah, it's hard to get people to do things. It's hard to get people to, I mean, the guys in District 1 and Russ has been running an amazing campaign. I mean, I'm in awe of how much money, how much energy, all the stuff. I mean, I feel embarrassed actually when I compare myself to Russ because he's just blowing me away by a million years. He's been working so hard.
for so
It's
long too. I mean, and he's just a
a long
marathon.
time.
And he
I've been
literally like I can't even talk him out of this. Like in my attempts to maybe sway some of his strategy, like he's literally going to go shake everybody's hand in the Western District of Montana. Like that
he's
is like
working.
he's going to listen to him and he's going to care about him. And
Yeah.
he's been on the road doing that for longer than any other candidate in the race. And it's so laudable. It's so
I know.
exemplary. I don't know how repeatable it is.
Yeah,
And again,
exactly.
this is back to like these concerns that we're just kind of discussing out loud. Like I think that's the heart of what we're talking about is we need
Mhm.
something reproducible that wins, or we're going to lose democracy. I mean, that to me is the black and white reality that we're currently in. And so to me, this is spaghetti at a wall. I just want to see if there are mechanisms that we can tap into that zeitgeist, right? To that
Yeah.
collective consciousness, and people are so hungry for it. And to me, I think your message does resonate. And I'm an authentic guy. Like 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 I
Agreed.
care about my kids. Like I'm not perfect. I'm not right about anything, but like I'm gonna show up. I'm gonna bring what I have to the table, and I'm gonna critically think so we can get real solutions for real people. Like I don't know. To me, it's like that is a breath of fresh air. Uh,
Well, it's funny too because like I'm not really like I do not like the celebrity culture around politicians.
mhm,
I just hate it. And
mhm,
honestly, it's not how the system's supposed to be
mhm,
working. It was really supposed to be set up so that an idiot like me
mhm,
or you or anybody takes a turn at the wheel.
mhm,
Because at the end of the day, I mean, now there are some qualifications you want to have. I mean, you do, like, I do tell people that, like, one thing I think I bring to the table is being an attorney. I understand the law and I understand
mhm,
how it affects people in the real world. And that's something that is important. That is something that you do. I also have had to work with subject matter experts from a lot of different fields, from psychology and medicine to
mhm,
construction and all points in between. So, like, I'm used to going to subject matter experts and saying, okay, tell me, you tell me, give me the information that I need here to prosecute this case or whatever. And I think that's something else that you is a positive quality, a skill set, I guess you'd say. But
mhm.
beyond that, I mean, I'm just a regular dude uh, that's going to screw up sometimes. And I guess the only thing I would say is that, like, I don't really care if I make a mistake or look stupid. I simply just don't care. That's just how I am. I could care less. And I think that's a problem too. A lot of politicians are get extremely defensive. They're afraid of getting attacked. Oh my God, if I
I
let
don't
a
want to be a flip
weakness
flopper. I don't want to be this. Yep.
exposed, I don't, and that's why you
Mhm,
get the political bullshit answers because I just really honestly don't care. And I honestly think that a lot of people really don't care. And I think that, and the Graham Plattner, I mentioned him earlier, right? He had some like wicked shit in his background. He just said, "Yeah, I screwed up. My bad."
mhm,
And now he's like way up. 'Cause people are like, "Thank you, man. Thank you for just being a real human being for a change." And I
mhm,
think right now that's what people want to see. But
mhm,
it's this is an experiment, Matt. It's an experiment, and I mean, I hope I get into the next level of the Hunger Games. I don't know if I will, but if I do, the interesting thing, and I wanted to make this point, um, was that listen, the dynamic. If anyone's watching this in District One and you're thinking about this race, the dynamic is going to shift after the primary is
mhm,
over. Okay, the dynamic is going to shift. Now, there's another candidate, Wendy Boy. He's anti-choice and he's got a sexual harassment thing in his background. So I just think I'm not saying he can't win, but he's going to be facing some very serious headwinds with women
mhm,
voters on that. I mean, he just is. Okay. Nothing he can do about it. I don't know how he plans to deal with it. I plan to raise this in the upcoming debates because I think it's
mhm,
something that needs to be talked about. So I don't know how that's going to impact his candidacy. I don't know how he's going to deal with that. He's never said how he's going to deal with it. And I think he's going to tell people how he's going to deal with it. And if he does, great. If he figures out a way to deal with that with women voters, good on him. But what I will say is that I know for myself and Sam that in when the primary if Samurai is in there, I know we're going to be in different ways. I mean, Sam and I have different gears, we have different approaches, different styles, but I know that both of us feel strongly about a lot of these issues that you and I are talking about, and we do have. It'll be interesting to see if it cuts through. I think that people might be willing to get more involved,
mhm,
might be willing to open their wallets because that's the flip side of this thing too. If you don't want dark money,
mhm,
individual people are going to have to chip into campaigns,
mhm,
and at a time when they don't have much money
mhm,
to begin with. So it's a tough thing to go up to people and say, "You're barely making it. Here, give me some money to campaign."
mhm,
And who has the money? The people that are doing really well off this system, who want to see the system continue. So it's tough.
mhm.
It's tough.
Yeah, I mean, I would, and it is the money thing is just an open-ended question that there aren't great answers to. But I just argue that if there's 100 people out there who are willing and able to hit the share button to generate their own content that help you tell a better story. I mean, like the things that you're saying is like we're all just asking for this, but you
Yeah.
get 100 people out there who are like elevating this story that hey, we've got a hardworking guy who wants to solve problems, who's willing to be wrong, who's willing to get his hands dirty, and then we figure out ways to amplify that. Like that is an exciting prospect, and doesn't necessarily require money. And so to me, there are alternative ways to take the system back.
Yeah.
And we got to tap into those. We also got to figure out the money thing. Like there are all these things, but right now, because it is such a moment of crisis and people are so hungry, that there is opportunity in the air. And
I agree.
and I just want to keep like I'm gonna keep throwing my spaghetti, man, until
Yeah, I
until
know.
until I see what sticks. And like
Well, it's the scientific process. Just so you know, Matt, my son texted me and
yeah.
I got like 10 minutes that he needs me to help him with something. So just wanted to give you a heads
So
up
we got
there
10
that
minutes.
we got 10
All
minutes.
right, all
Yeah.
right, perfect. Well,
10-minute warning.
all right. So I'm gonna ask you that question that I wonder, like, who are we as Americans, and take it back to the founding, the
Yeah.
Constitution. Like what, like who are we?
It's a tough question, man. Here's the thing is that like I know the way everybody has a different way of looking at history. I mean, I think we've talked a lot about this in the course of this discussion. By the way, we'll have more of these discussions. I mean,
Mhm.
I feel like we're generating a lot more
Mhm.
content that we get into, and we'll keep doing this. Um, you know, it's America is a complicated. It's complicated, and it's complicated because of slavery, and it's complicated because of how the native
Mhm.
indigenous people were treated.
Mhm.
Because you had this great, wonderful declaration, and women too.
Mhm.
You had this great, wonderful Declaration of Independence. All men are created equal. But you know what? That's not how it was really
It
happening.
didn't
And
unfold that way. Yeah.
many of the founders were acutely aware of that, and they weren't comfortable with it. Now, some were more on the spectrum than others. I mean, Washington and Hamilton were more on they would have probably loved to just gotten rid of slavery. They would have loved it. And I think, other ones like John Adams as well. I mean, Washington had slaves, but by all accounts, as far as we know, he was treating them decently. And when he died, he freed them all. And most of the founders didn't do that. And Jefferson was actually horrible on slavery. Jefferson, the guy who wrote the Declaration of Independence, I actually showed this document in my talks.
Mhm.
One of his slaves escaped, and he actually put out an ad in the paper to bring his slave back. The guy who wrote the Declaration of Independence trying to get his slave back. It's sick. So that thing has
Mhm.
always been a problem, and I think it's tortured us.
Mhm.
And this ancient evil. Lincoln called it the same old serpent of this slavery mentality that has haunted our country is something that Trump resurrected with the MAGA movement 10 years ago. It's essentially a slavery type of argument, but it was directed against immigrants. And it was, but if you look at the rhetoric, man, and I do this in my presentation, and someday, maybe if you want, next one I could give me the screen and I'll go through, we could have a whole discussion. I could show video. We could really get into the weeds on this thing.
Mhm.
But when you look at Trump's rhetoric, it is the same rhetoric as the slave masters that just twisted it. A lot of MAGA people hate that. How dare you say that? And I'm like, well, I don't know what to tell you. It is what it is.
I mean,
You want to
I
believe
mean, like
you got a
from
First Amendment right to be racist. It is what it is. So it's
poisoning the
complicated.
blood of our people. I mean, you can go back through his quotes,
They're
and
horrible.
it's unbelievable the level of yeah, like
So
they
that's
map on to a narrative that has
correct.
been really tragic throughout history.
So there's that whole thing. So it's
Hmm.
complicated. Maybe it's even schizophrenic. I don't know.
Hmm.
So who are we? I think that's the question mark now that we need to answer.
Hmm.
And I can just tell you all I can do from my point of view is tell you who I think we should be.
Hmm.
Okay. And that's all I can really do. Because a lot of people are going to have a different answer. But what I think is this: I think that we've gone through a period of darkness um, over the past 10 years. And I'm not going to blame it all on Trump, but he catalyzed it. He's a catalyst. And this was something inside of us. You know this from the field of psychology that sometimes you need a catalyst to bring up. We've
Hmm.
talked about this. We both like Carl Jung. Carl Jung always talks about the shadow. The shadow gets activated, gets brought up to consciousness. Okay. That's how I tend to look at this is we've had this darkness. What are we going to do with it now? What are we going to do? The Iran thing, again, this darkness. What are we going to do? What's our response? And I'm encouraged, Matt. I'm very encouraged. When you look at the polling on the Iran war, when you look at the sympathy that has been generated towards the Palestinians among the general, cutting across conservative, liberal, whatever, you see a unified people you see this moral consciousness beginning to wake up from a slumber. People are like, we don't like this. We don't like Iran. And they don't like how immigrants have been treated. And they don't like how the federal government has been assassinating people. They don't like Trump building all these monuments. When you look at this over and over and over again, Trump's approval rating is like 33 or 34%. So you are seeing this moral consciousness awaken. But it's these races, it's these political races where we direct that, we talk about what that's going to be. And Matt, all I can do as a candidate, I feel my responsibility is to articulate it as clearly as I can. And if people like it, great. And if you think Miller for Congress is an idiot, you don't want to vote for him, that's fine too. But that's all I can do, right? Is just put it out there and we hope that. And like I said, like I'm not doing this because I want attention or I have daddy issues or some bullshit like that. I'm seriously just doing this. Well, I'm thinking a lot of politicians, I think they have daddy issues. They like Trump. His dad didn't pay attention to him enough, so he's, you know what I mean? And this is a real thing. We know this. And so it's just I got kids that I want to see. I don't want to see them live in an apocalyptic hellhole with Skynet chasing them down. I saw too many Arnold Schwarzenegger movies as a kid, man. That's what this is all about. You want to analyze me? I saw too many Arnold Schwarzenegger movies as a kid. It made me scared.
That's a diagnosis in the DSM, man. Yeah, too many. It's one of the symptoms of, yeah.
Yeah. All right, you got to wrap this up.
Yeah, I'm wrapping it up right now. And all right, so to leave it on an open-ended question is maybe who do we want to be as a people? Like what do we want America to be? And that might be the question we've been trying to resolve for a couple hundred years now, as there's this misalignment with who we say we are in the Constitution, which is that we value freedom and equality and human rights and human dignity, and yet we have this track record of not doing such a great job in a lot of those areas. And so who do we want to be? And then how do we elect the people who are standing up, who are not bought and paid for, who are willing to fail and critically reason through that? And maybe some smart people, maybe some people with some skill sets, like that would be pretty helpful as well, but not corrupt, evil, people who just want more power, or really want to support the cause of making Elon Musk the first trillionaire. Like maybe we don't want that. And so, like, how do we rescue this right now? Like, this is the time. And so, who do we want to be? I think that's the question. And then the last thing I would say too is that this is an ongoing project that you and I have proposed, and I think what we're going to do is sort of I'm utilizing my platform here just to kind of launch this and then hand this over, and you've got some really cool ideas that you're working on, but just to continue this discussion, to invite people into this discussion. Like, we would love a live audience and some hecklers, and like, we'll heckle you back. I mean, whatever, but like how to make this fun, engaging, but also just like, instead of sound bites and the next thing that makes you feel afraid, like, how do we invite people into this process of figuring out who we are and who we want to be? So
let me make a suggestion. So I know that I've gotten to meet some of the other candidates, and I know like Alani, Michael Black Wolf, Sam, myself. I don't know Wendy Boy. I assume he also.
Sam Forstak's phenomenal too, man. I really like that guy.
If you get a response on this, let's do an event in Billings and just say, let's have that be the question, right? Like, who do we want to be as Americans, and just see how many candidates come up, and let's just kick this around the horn with everybody. Because you know what? There's a lot of great people that are running right now, and it's just a lot of like normal ass people that just throwing their hats in the rings. And I think this could be something worth doing if you get a response from this. But listen, if people like it, because here's the thing, this is what I've learned. This is a nut I haven't cracked yet, is getting turnout for these things. And to get turnout, you've got to have people on the ground in Billings who are willing to go out, put out things, call people, post on their social media, and say, hey, come to this event and let's talk about this. So that could be something that would be. And then you could stream it. You could do it. You could stream it and maybe get the press there. And I think, it's thought.
I love it, man. Yeah, for sure. I mean, let's build it. Let's dream it and build it. And then just anybody who's like, just wake up. Like we need you awake right now. It is burning.
And remember, Remember, there's people out there that are barely able to make anything
I
happen. They
know,
don't have time
man.
for this shit, right?
I
I
know.
mean, this is kind of luxurious in a way, but it's
Mm.
important. It's not just navel gazing. We're talking about shit, and then the challenge is translating it down into the ground, into the
Mm.
lives of real people who don't have time to sit around and have these conversations, right? We got to
So
be
well said.
mindful of that.
So well
And but
said.
we care about
Hmm.
those people. We don't. We want them to have more time. We want them to be able to relax and
Hmm.
enjoy life instead of always being treading water, right? We've got to, that's a terrible feeling when you've been in that state. We don't want that. We don't want to see anybody like that.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
All
really
right,
well
brother.
said.
Well, thank you. I wish we'll do this again.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
man.
thanks. This has been great,
That's a
man.
lot of
It's
fun,
been
right?
great.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
just good. It's good hanging with you, Brian. The live
Anytime,
stream
brother.
is almost secondary as far as I'm concerned. All right,
Just two
man.
bros, just chatting, just random bros.
Broing out. Just broing out. All right, man. Have
Thrown
a good
out.
night, Brian. Great to
All
see you,
right,
brother.
later. Yep.
Thank you for listening to the Pay Love Forward podcast. If this conversation moved you, inspired you, or made you pause to reflect, don't let it in there. Pay Love Forward is more than a podcast. It's a movement, a community, a way of being. At its heart is a simple commitment to invest in others in ways that multiply. In partnership with Resilient Stories, we're committed to hearing the story within the story, the deeper narrative of courage, compassion, and renewal that reminds us who we are and what we're capable of together. If you'd like to walk with us, find a mentor, find a mentee, or join one of our community gatherings. You can connect through Facebook or visit www.payloveforward.net to learn more. Let's keep building something beautiful together.